Good evening, and thank you for joining us. My name is Christy, and I would like to welcome you to the Doylestown Bookshop's virtual event series. We are so excited to welcome friend and Nebula Award-winning author Fran Wilde as she discusses her new middle grade fantasy, The Ship of Stolen Words, with another friend, New York Times bestselling author Jonathan Maberry. Our guests will be in conversation for about 30 minutes. After that, they will take questions from you, the viewers. If you would like to submit a question, please click on Ask a Question on your screen and enter your question there. If you're watching from a phone or tablet, click the icon with the question mark to submit your questions. If you would like to purchase The Ship of Stolen Words from the Doylestown or Alaska bookshops, click the button on your screen that says Buy the Book. We have curbside pickup available at both of our locations and ship worldwide. Fran will be stopping by tomorrow to personalize all pre-orders and books sold at this event. If you would like a signed copy, please note that in the order comments section at checkout when you order with us online. I've also had a few questions from viewers who are used to Zoom events, so to avoid any confusion, only the authors and I will have access to video and audio. You can interact with us through the live chat and during the Q&A. Now, a little bit about our guests. Fran Wilde's novels include the 2019 Nebula Award-winning Middle Grade Riverland, which was also a Lotus Star finalist and an NPR Favorite Book of 2019. She is also the author of the 2015 Nebula Award-winning Updraft, part of the Bone Universe trilogy. She writes for publications including The Washington Post, NPR, The New York Times, and Tor.com. Jonathan Maberry is the New York Times bestselling and multiple Bram Stoker Award-winning author of Deep Silence, Kill Switch, Predator 1, Code Zero, and many, many, many more. His Viewers series has been adapted by Netflix, and his work for Marvel Comics includes The Punisher, Wolverine, Doom War, Marvel Zombie Return, and Black Panther. His Joe Ledger series has been optioned for television. Hello, both of you, and welcome. I'm so excited for this event.
Hi,
Thanks for
thank you
having
so
us,
much for
Chrissy.
having us.
It's wonderful to be here with Doylestown Books and with Fran, who's an old friend. Happy book birthday, Fran. I mean, today is the actual book
Yes.
birthday.
Today is the
Usually,
actual book birthday.
it's actually not that common to have book events on the actual book birthday. So,
Right.
yay.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love having you here because Doylestown Books has always meant so much to me and so much to my career. Thank you guys for supporting us. But Jonathan, Doylestown was like your East Coast like bat cave for the longest time. You ran like YA reading series out of here. You did lots of stuff. It's so nice to be back here together and being able to celebrate independent bookstores and talk about books with you.
Oh,
Yeah, and it's really great. I mean, we used to run an experimental writing class at Doylestown Books, and two of those students went on to publish, mainstream books. So, we're.
Well, I'm going to
It's
pop
nice
off
that
screen. Oh, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I'm going to pop off screen, but I'll be back for the Q&A.
Okay. Thank you, Chrissy.
Just a real quick thing about independent bookstores is one of the reasons I love them so much, and Doylestown Bookshop is a great example because the staff has been there forever. You go to some of the big box stores and ask for a book, they can tell you where it's shelved. Go into Doylestown, they can tell you about the book. They can also often tell you about the reader. They know they're readers themselves. They're dedicated readers, and what a wonderful environment that is. You walk in there with maybe one book in mind, you come out with 10, and they're all recommended by the staff. It's great. So, Fran, I want to talk about Ship of Stolen Words. I friggin' love this book. Absolutely love this book.
Thank you.
And I love the fact that it deals with the power and consequences of what we say.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that really compelled me when I was reading it because that is not a topic you see enough of in fiction. What drew you to that as kind of the skeleton for the book?
I think a couple of different things. One was that I've been a teacher for a long time, and I've been a camp counselor for a long time, and I've been a poet for even longer than that. And just sort of the malleability of words and the way that we acquire them and learn how to use them has been something that's in the back of my mind for a long time, especially with kids. But lately, and I'm talking about like the last 5-6 years, especially the plasticity of words has become more of a problem, where you can say something and not have it attached to meaning anymore. And I really wanted to write something about how important it is to know what you're saying and also know why you're saying it. But also to realize that kids learn by playing with things and by making mistakes. And there are characters who are experiencing different levels of language acquisition all through the book. And of course, it doesn't say that in the book because this book is for kids and it's supposed to be fun. But Sam has learned that certain words get him out of trouble, so he uses them a lot. And Sam's little sister Bella, she's lost a tooth, so she's trying to figure out how to make words go without being able to say them properly. And also, she's still trying to figure out where words work and where they don't. And she has something that's pretty common to a lot of little kids, but also a lot of girls, which is that she says sorry a lot when she hasn't necessarily done anything wrong. It's just sort of, I'm sorry that you're feeling bad, or I'm sorry that this isn't going well for you. And I wanted to unpack that a little bit too, because that's kind of a social nicety that some people are trained into, and some people have learned to, feel very bad about that they're doing. And I do it myself. I've done it since I was a little kid. And, I'm so sorry it's raining is something that I have said before. And I have no control over the rain. There's no way to, for me to stop that. But what I mean is, I wish that things were better for you. And, but on occasion, I have also apologized for things repeatedly, or when it's not my fault, just to sort of smooth the situation over. And so that's come up too. And at one point, I was caught in an apology loop for a very long time. And a very good writer friend of mine, Elizabeth Bear, decided that she was going to take my sorries away. She actually said, you can't use the word sorry for 2 weeks. And it was torture. It was super hard, but I learned a lot. And I learned also about how often I say the word sorry. So when it came time to talk to my editor about what I wanted to write next, I thought, I want to write about goblins who steal words like sorry and other words that get used a little bit too often, and they use them to power their own machines because they can turn them into hot air. So they have all of these flying machines, and they use the words that aren't necessarily being used in the right way, but they've also started perfecting tools to use other words too. So we're in this, the town that I'm writing about, and the kids in the town are sort of at risk of losing all their words, even the good ones. And I wanted to write about that too. So that's the long answer.
No, but it's a good answer, and it actually leads to something else I was thinking about while I was reading the book. We live in an age of messaging. We're messaging through so many different methods, and so much of that gets misunderstood because messaging lacks inflection, and that often changes. I've had arguments with good friends because the message comes across as wrong, and of course our reaction is to react to the words posted, not potential meaning, and it's hard, as older adults. Well, I'm an older adult, you're not. As an older adult, I'm so used to verbal messaging that, inflection is always carried with it. But with kids, with text message, there's a whole new skill set to be learned, and words, they find out that words have great importance and great impact. I think this book is going to be really useful in starting conversations about what you actually intend to say, rather than what comes out of your mouth as a reflex, whether it be I'm sorry or something else.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I quite often wish there was an irony font for text so that you could, or a flag that says, I'm just kidding.
Download that so fast.
But it is important. And remembering, despite the modeling that we've seen through politics and media, that remembering that words are important and they're magic. I mean, the words can make things happen. They are they are magic spells in and of themselves, and they do a lot of magic. And I really, I wanted to explore that in, very clear ways. And there are the words that power magic spells are also important words throughout the book. So that was really important too.
When I was reading it, I was reading it to blurb it, and also because I love your writing.
You gave it a great thank you so much. That was amazing.
I mean, it's a really good book. It's it may actually be my favorite of yours, though. Updraft, man, I loved Updraft a whole bunch. But we'll get to that in a sec. But Ship Sewing Words, it just feels like it's a great conversation starter. It really does. I mean, I really think that teachers can have the conversation with kids, adults can have it, parents can have it with kids can have it with each other. I know that when I was reading it, I knew it was middle grade, but I was reading it. I mean, I was getting a lot out of the subtext of communication, of the power of words. It reminds me of that old, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. That has never been true.
That's never been true.
Never.
They hurt, they sting, they leave a mark. You remember things that people say that cause concern a lot more than you remember nice things. Which is also kind of funny. I wish we could remember nice things better. I wish I could remember nice things better.
So getting back to Updraft, I mean, you broke pretty big with that. It was nominated for the Nebula. It won, I believe, the Andre Norton and Compton Crook Awards. Mm-hmm. Where'd that idea come from? Because that was a pretty, pardon the expression, novel idea as well.
So that actually came out of a couple of different directions, but Updraft started as a short story that I wrote as a challenge. I had a 24-hour write a story challenge at Viable Paradise, which was a writer's retreat and workshop off the coast of Martha's Vineyard. And that was in 2011. And I had gotten a prompt, and I had been determined that I was going to write a story about a mechanical Turk because I was fascinated with automatons and I wanted to really write that. And I wrote that. And about 1 o'clock in the morning, I realized that was not what I wanted to be writing about. I had been talking with people all weekend about sort of scale and structure and living cities and the idea of intelligences and things that we couldn't understand because their scale was so big. And I had also gotten in a deep discussion with another writer about Paradise Lost and John Milton and sort of pandemonium and fall from heaven things. And none of that went into the core of the story. It was just the underlying structure has part of it. I was a Milton scholar in college. And so when I sat down to write this story, it ended up being literally a fall from a great height by two characters. And that short story was 2,000 words long, and everybody who read it knew how Cloudbound ended, but they kept the secret for like 5 years. And what I got out of that wasn't necessarily the main characters, because it was actually one of the side characters for another story. What I got out of it was the setting. And sometimes those exercises, those prompts really do help you generate something, but you don't know it yet. The setting was so important, that city of living bone and what was down there and what happens when your society is so focused on going up and you don't realize how much you're losing because you're running out of oxygen. Literally, you're unable to carry your social memory higher. So all you've got is sort of you have to maintain rigid rules, and you have to maintain a cultural memory using songs and voice. So that was part of it. I also spent a lot of time, because I love the idea of bridges being used both to unite a community, but also as a form of control, access to bridges and things like that. And how people would get around up in the air, that far up in the air. So I was exploring all of those things, and I, in the story that I started writing after I had written that short story, I heard Kirit, who is the main character, arguing with her mother. She wanted to go along on a rescue mission that her mother was going on to deliver medicine to another tower, and she wasn't allowed to go. And the things ensue from there, and everything kind of starts to fall apart from there. But I heard that conversation first. And so once you hear the characters' voices, then you can really start sort of drafting and figuring out, because you know what they want then. If you hear their voices, you kind of know what they want.
It's interesting. Interesting when that happens, when characters start speaking in your head. I said once before that if you're not a writer, this is a cry for help. But if you are a writer, if you're a writer, this is what should happen. Your characters become alive within your head, and they start conversations. I mean, my Joe Ledger series started. I was sitting at a diner, Red Lion Diner in Willow Grove, working on one of my nonfiction books. Two characters started speaking in my head, and I didn't even know who they were. All I know is they had manifested out of all the bits and pieces of little data that float around in a writer's brain, and started having a conversation. And that became a conversation that led to the first Joe Ledger book. And, if a good writer pays attention to it and then takes agency over it and writes it down. Shifting gears a little bit.
I think so. Although I do want to say that sometimes your characters are talking to you in the text, and they're telling you that the way that you are going with that plot is a bad idea, and you need to stop and turn around. My characters constantly in Updraft, they were doing this, but it happened in Ship of Stolen Words too, where they would say, I don't know what to do, or this is a bad, more constantly, this is a bad plan, or I'm bored. And when I could search on that and figure out where I needed to go in and revise, or stop and turn around and replot, because my characters are talking to me that way. And it was interesting because once Sam and his friends were doing just fine. For a while, this was just Sam's point of view. And my editor, Maggie Lerman at Abrams, who is brilliant, took a look at a draft and said, what would really be good is if you added Tolver's point of view and had both sides of the story going. And she's right. I mean, that's not anything that you ever want to hear from your editor when you're on deadline for production, but she was absolutely right. And when I went back and wrote Tolver's side of things, all of a sudden the action just picked up and the tension picked up, and everything became much more fully rounded, because there's never just one side of the story. And there's never just one side of a conflict, even if the conflict is like, you have what I want and I need it. And so that was pretty cool, just to hear both of their voices at the same time.
Yeah, I had a similar note for, again, Patient Zero, my first Joe Ledger book, way back. Michael Homeler at St. Martin's Griffin said, the villain was always in his own head. And the editor said, you need to give him a Watson. You give him somebody to talk to, because then the conversation becomes alive. And the character I created for that wound up becoming one of the most popular characters in the series, the character Toys. Sometimes editors are very underappreciated.
Editors are so great, aren't they?
Good editor and good notes is, it's worth their weight in gold. It's quite amazing. So shifting gears to one of my personal favorites of all that you've written, the Unsealy Brothers, which you published in, I believe, in Uncanny magazine. I freaking love that story. Are you going to be doing any more with the Unsealy Brothers?
I would very much like to do more. Yes. That just came out May 1st. It was the first week in May, and I loved it when I was writing it. I knew I was writing a fairy tale, but it started with a question, just like pretty much everything that I've written starts with a question. And it was, what if dark fairies took over haute couture fashion in New York City during, the debutante week? And so it had all that, the elements of sort of social pressure and trying to one up each other, but with the added danger of what if fairies? And there were a couple times where my characters and I wrote ourselves into corners. But one of the things that happened during the second draft, and I have some wonderful beta readers, and I have to say they looked at what I was doing and they were like, but what if you just embiggen this? What if you look at that? And I remembered that I was in a fairy tale, and that I could do things in that story that weren't necessarily what would be happening if I was just writing about fashion. Although that's really fun too. I love that. But I love there are some characters in there that I'd really like to explore. And one of them is Dora, when she turns around the first time and I said her mouth is full of pins.
Yeah.
I won't. No more spoilers. But thank you so much for reading it and for liking it. That is amazing.
Yeah, and people can go to Uncanny Magazine online and read the story. It's up there, and it is such a charming story, such a funny story, in a weird, quirky way. And my guilty pleasure is I watch shows like Project Runway and so on. I loved that story. I thought it was great. So you're drawn to portal fiction. So for those who don't know what it is, explain what portal fiction is and why that pulls you through that portal.
And actually, Unsealy Brothers is kind of a portal fantasy too, because the shop tends to disappear and mostly comes back and delivers its dresses, but sometimes it doesn't. One of their portal fantasies do a certain thing, especially in children's literature, which is that they allow kids to take a problem that they're having in the real world and solve it in the fantasy world before they come back over. And Riverland is a portal fantasy, of course, and Ship of Stolen Words is a dual portal fantasy because both sides have problems and both characters are going to the other side to solve them. But you have read portal fantasies. Everybody has. Peter Pan is actually a portal fantasy trying to solve the problem of growing up. The Phantom Tollbooth, Narnia, and Narnia is a really interesting one because it really allows you to show that idea of solving the problem, because the kids are leaving World War II in London, in England, and going through to Narnia, which is also having a massive war, and they become kings and queens of it. Sorry for spoilers if you don't know the story, and sort of maybe don't figure out quite how to solve the problem, but figure out how to live in it. And what they want.
Yeah, that was the point, because kids had to be able to live during World War II. With the shifting, moving out of London to the country and everything else. Those kids had often their parents were absent or they were with relatives or something, so they had to take control over their lives. They had to feel empowered, otherwise they feel like victims. And that showed up in Narnia, and it shows up in a lot of your stories too. A character who is thrust out of one world into a world where they're actually able to eventually solve their own problems, not have them solved for them, but solve their own problems through their experiences.
Yeah. So that's part of why I love it. Sorry?
Well, you mentioned Phantom Tollbooth, and that's a favorite. What about that intrigues you still? Or intrigued you then?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I have 4 copies of it. I have the one that Michael Chabon wrote the introduction to for the 50th anniversary. I have a copy that I keep to give away to other people. I have a copy for me that is just a regular paperback. And then I have my first copy, which is taped together because it's so old. And what I love about it, aside from the puns and the humor, which is just all over, is the wordplay. And the idea of like the mathemagician and the dodecahedron. And my favorite character in that whole entire thing is Alec Bing. Alec Bings is the character who's born at the right height and his feet grow down. And he tells this whole story of how all of his relatives were born like that, and that's normal. But sometimes people are born upside down and they walk among the stars. And I just got captivated by it. And what it is it's a road trip story. And the portal fantasy aspect, the thing that they're trying to solve is Milo is bored. And he's bored, like he's got very adult ennui. And he's drawn in a very sort of adult way. But by the time that they take this road trip, he has discovered wonder. And I love it for just that reason, that there is this point where in going through all of these very interesting places with these characters that are telling him who they are or allowing him to experience something like the symphony, the Sunrise Symphony for the first time. And the humbug. It's one of my favorite books. When I was a camp counselor back in the very last millennium, this is one of the books that we used to read to our campers at night. And it's a great read aloud book. So that's fun too.
Yeah, I just recently listened to the Rainn Wilson read of it on Audible. It was fantastic.
Oh, I haven't done that yet. I should try that.
My book.
How about you? What is your favorite portal fantasy?
It's Something Wicked This Way Comes, because they go
I'm not
to the
surprised.
world of Cougar and Dog Pandemonium Shadow Show, and they change their lives and so on. That book was given to me for Christmas, 1973, by a signed copy by Ray Bradbury. So
wow.
It was. Wow. That Christmas, he gave me that, and Richard Matheson gave me a signed copy of the 1954 paperback of I Am Legend. And my copies are well protected. I buy a new copy every year and read them and give them to either a regular library or one of those little corner libraries where people put outside their house. It's such a wonderful story. It's magical, and it is about leaving your own life and finding out that what you think you want may not be what you want, and what you really need is right there, but you can't see it. And it's such an amazing book. Creepy and weird and fun, and the second best thing Bradbury ever wrote after Dandelion Wine, which is, I think, one of the finest books ever written. But it is
the provenance on those books. How did you come? They just showed up at your door and said, "Here, John."
No, the short version of the story, and I'll be real quick with it. My middle school librarian from John Paul Jones Junior High School in Philadelphia was the secretary for two different clubs of professional writers. One that met in Philly, which was the fantasy crowd, Sprague de Camp, George Sitters, and that crowd. And then one that met infrequently in New York, which, we're talking the early 70s. That's where all books were launched back then. And so, this publisher would have parties with whatever writers, science fiction, fantasy, and horror writers were in town, and she'd bring me up to those parties. So I got to meet Bradbury, Matheson, Arthur C. Clarke, Robert Bloch, Harlan Ellison, all these greats I didn't know at the time. And but Bradbury and Matheson, over a period of the 3 years that we were going up to those things, took me under their wing because they realized I was truly interested in becoming a writer. And I got the very last cover quotes from each of those writers before they passed. And they're on the 10th anniversary edition of my Ghost Road Blues novel, which made me cry. But yeah, they were landmark, and they know how to, Bradbury had that unique gift that if he was alive today, he would still be the king of young adult fiction, because he can think like a child and write like an adult. So his stories speak to both. And wonderful to read as a kid, and interesting, just like Phantom Tollbooth. I got a whole different set of things out of it when I listened to it as an adult than I did when I was a kid, or even a younger adult. Those books change, the best books change with us, and we can peel back those layers.
Yes. Yeah. That is so true.
Now, before we switch to questions in a couple minutes, so you're a Philly gal, but and I'm Philly, but I bailed and I moved to Southern California. What keeps you back in the old town?
My family keeps me here. I was born and raised on the main line. I went to high school here, and then left for college and grad school, and was perfectly happy in Baltimore, Maryland. In fact, I was absolutely in love with it. I love Fells Point and the boats and the waterfront in the Chesapeake Bay. But my husband, who is known online as the chemist, got a job up here, and off we went. And when we moved back, I really wanted to live on the other side of the Schuylkill River. For those of you who are tuning in from out of town, the place names in Philadelphia are fantastic for a number of reasons. One is that no one else can say them or spell them. And two, they're really good to curse with when you don't want to curse. So Conshohocken or Schuylkill, they're just great words. Not that I curse ever. But when we moved back in 2007, and I was sort of thinking, well, we'll stay for a little bit. And you know what happened in 2007, Jonathan? I bumped into my friend, who was that was John McGoran, who was my editor over at the Weaver's Way shuttle, because I was their proofreader when I moved back. That was my volunteer service to the local co-op. And he said, you should stop on by a writer's coffee house that my friends and I do, and see what you think, because I was looking for a community, and that is part of what holds me here still, is that there are some amazing communities of writers. And you mentioned that before, that's like, what helped you become a writer, but that's the Philadelphia Kidlit scene is amazing. The writers' coffee houses are still going. I met again Gregory Frost and went to one of his workshops with The Bridge, and the people that I met at his workshop have become part of my critique group. And so it really does build up, and writing life is not an easy thing. It's sometimes very isolating. And you spend a lot of time in your head, and having good communities and creating good communities where you can then give back is so important. And I think that you set a really excellent example with that, with the Writers' Coffee Houses.
Thank you. It started out, I got to admit, a little selfishly. I had around 1998, 99, I had burned out on writing. I'd been writing part-time nonfiction for decades and kind of burned out because I didn't know any other writers. And I wound up going to Philadelphia Writers Conference, just kind of because I figured this last shot to meet some writers. Wound up not only, I don't think I went to any of the workshops. I just was in the community room between classes talking to other writers. And because of that, I wound up getting a gig later on to run the writers' room of Doylestown, which was in writers' room of Bucks County, which is in Doylestown. And we found out that after classes, a lot of writers would hang out and just talk to one another. This is pre-social media, because there was no way for writers to meet writers other than in these environments. And that's where we created the Writers Coffee House about 20 years ago, maybe a little longer. We now have 18 of them. I run the San Diego one. And it's, writers helping writers. There's no pay, no registration, no agenda, no publishing credits needed. It's writers helping writers. And we found that the community thrived on the fact that we could feed off each other's energy. We're kind of like benign energetic vampires. We feed on that energy. We don't flourish in isolation. So, I mean, we're lucky that during COVID, we were able to do, our coffee houses online. We were able to do these events online and so on. Mm-hmm. But in isolation before social media, it was really tough for writers to keep their enthusiasm and to connect with readers and writers and booksellers and everything else. It's been really wonderful.
I gotta say, there's a lot of people in the audience today that I just want to shout out to, like all of you guys that are waving and saying hi. You're part of my community, and a lot of you are people who have kept me writing or have encouraged me. I mean, Eugene Myers is out there. He's a Nebula Award-winning author as well, and Carlos Hernandez and Claire Cootie. I see you guys there, and like the librarians that are in the room. I just wanted to acknowledge, because I can't turn the camera onto you right now, that you're out there, and I appreciate every single one of you, and I'm so glad that almost 40 of you showed up tonight. That's really amazing. I love you too.
Yeah, that's really great, and it's wonderful to see so many faces, or see so many names rather, popping up. That I'm just happy to see. One is curious though. Jeremy Brett. I'm pretty sure it's not the ghost of the guy who played Sherlock Holmes.
He was my favorite.
It is not. Jeremy is the science fiction and fantasy archivist at Texas A&M University, and he is a huge fan. He's amazing. But I also owe him a box of my notebooks because he's archiving them for me. So
outstanding. So
he's like,
Chrissy,
Jeremy's like, you say that a lot, Fran. I will get them.
I bet
so, Chrissy, you have questions from the audience?
I do have some questions from the audience. Thank you, everyone, for submitting your questions. And it's not too late. If you'd like to submit a question, click Ask a Question on your screen, and you can submit them there. Our first
and just as a reminder, I'm going to be signing books at Doylestown tomorrow. I have a couple of extra bookmarks and a bunch of extra stickers, so I will probably be tucking them into copies. It would be wonderful to be able to write your name down on a copy and send it to you.
If you'd like to buy the book, there's a button on your screen that says buy the book. That'll take you right to our website, and you can buy it there.
And also buy Jonathan's books, because Jonathan's books are great and scary and creepy and amazing. And he's got something like 20 new books coming your way soon, like tomorrow.
So anyway, let's get to the questions.
Okay.
Enough about
it. So this is for both authors, and Fran, I'll have you answer this first. This is from Claire. Would you tell us more of your favorite writing prompts that prompted stories that surprised you?
Oh, wow. Some of my favorite things to do for writing prompts are to make lists of different items and then cross-reference them. So taking a lyric from a song or a poem and cross-referencing it with something I like. You've got a good shot of my coffee maker back there. Coffee is also very key to my writing process. But I think that taking disparate things and mashing them together really does generate a lot of really great ideas. So often that happens, and sometimes it's just a word or a phrase, or I hear the opening line of a story. That happened with Clearly Lettered in a Mostly Steady Hand. I knew exactly where that was going the minute my pen hit the paper. But things like The Ship of Stolen Words came from a couple different writing prompts, and one of them was absolutely my editor saying, yes, word stealing goblins, but what if they have truffle pigs? What if they have like word sniffing hunting pigs? And I was like, yes, they need to. But then I had to figure out how those pigs were actually goblins too, and they turned out to be a kind of a puka, which is a shape-shifting goblin that really liked to just hang out in the mud. So they just decided to keep the shape of pigs mostly. So that's kind of, I like to just combine different things and see what happens.
Cool.
How about you, Jonathan?
For me, it's a couple different ways in which I get story ideas. Most often, I actually just read a lot. I read a lot of nonfiction, read a lot of science and politics and history and so on, looking for weird stuff that's happened or new innovations in science. And I think, what's the worst that can happen? Because thriller writers, and most of what I write, even the horror and fantasy, is kind of a thriller structure, race against time to prevent the big bad from happening. And we're not in the business of giving happy characters a good week. We're in the business of screwing their lives up so they can then figure a way to hopefully solve it. But the biggest prompts come when I'm invited to an anthology, because they're often themed anthologies. Like Mike Mignola, who created Hellboy, asked me to write a story of set in the 70s with Hellboy. I'm like, okay, that's a writing prompt. I got to come up with a story for that. I had one of my favorites is a couple of years ago, some years ago, I had an editor, John Joseph Adams, reach out to me and say, I'd like you to write an Oz story for an anthology of Oz books, and an anthology of Oz tales that are kind of a little different, and my first inclination, unfortunately, had been I'm a horror writer, so I was going to get the part of a serial or go to rampage with his axe, which would have been fun to write, and my fans would have liked it, but it wasn't the right response to that prompt for the audience that reads Oz. So I went up thinking about who reads Oz and what would they want someone to write now, And I went up writing a story about a little winged monkey girl whose wings were too small for her to fly, so she wanted to find magic traveling shoes so that she can go all the places her wings couldn't take her. And in the Oz books, the winged monkey people were enslaved by the witch, but they were actually an advanced culture by themselves prior and after that. And as I'm writing it, I'm like, this is totally outside my comfort zone. And that's sometimes what a writing prompt does. It pushes you out of your comfort zone. I had not written middle grade or YA up to that point, and I wrote the story, and it came out in the anthology. It got mentioned in a lot of reviews, New York Times and Publishers Weekly and so on. And then I got a letter rather, from the estate of L. Frank Baum, who created the Oz books. And I'm thinking, oh, great, they're going to fry me messing with their characters. And they said that they love the story so much, they're adding it to the official chronology of Oz. It is henceforth a prequel to Wizard of Oz forever. And yeah, I ugly cried on that one. It's probably one of the highlights of my career. And it wouldn't have happened if I had not been given a prompt to try to do something outside my comfort zone, and B, if I had not actually respected the audience for that, so that the prompt then steered me in the right direction. So sometimes writing prompts really lead you to some of your best writing and some of your best career moments.
It's true. Yeah, we actually teach, or we've been teaching in the genre fiction writing program that I teach in. We've been teaching your short story From Robots versus Fairies for a number of years, and it's just wonderful to teach, because it starts a whole conversation about how. Yes, yeah, we teach Ironheart. When we talk about how to begin a story and how to end it, and what the shape of the story becomes, and that's a really wonderful one to teach.
Oh, thank you. I'm very happy with it. Well,
our next question is from Miriam. This is for Fran. Ship of Stolen Words reminds me of the fire opal mechanism and the incredible image of the pressman's presses that turn words in the books into liquid. Can you talk about that connection?
Interesting. So I think it was coming out of a very similar sensibility and a similar concern. With the Fire Opal mechanism, that is a group of people who want to make sure that everybody's reading the same words, and that then the control sort of shifts to whoever has the production of the printing press. It also has, because it's in the gem world, the printing press is run by a very bad emerald, and that definitely makes things go completely bad very fast. But it's still the importance of words. But there's a quote at the beginning of that one that it's where there are three main characters in that story. There's a librarian, there's a thief, and then there's the printing press manager. And the librarian is talking about how all books are sort of an image of the era in which they were written. And they aren't necessarily meant to last, but that all books are kind of time travelers in their own sort of way. And they don't just allow the reader to time travel, but they allow the world to time travel back. And so that's sort of the one half of language and how magic it is. And the other half is, of course, the way that we use words when we speak and when we talk, and how magic that can be as well. So I can totally see that. I was actually drafting, I wrote The Ship of Stolen Words after I had written the first draft of the Fire Opal mechanism, but I think I finished editing the Fire Opal mechanism. It came out in 2017, I think 2017 or 2018. And it came out I'm being corrected. This came out in 2019. So it has definitely some of the same thoughts that I was thinking in both. That's interesting though. I had never really made the connection.
Cool.
Okay. Our next question is from Java Chick, and this can be for both authors, and we'll have Jonathan go first. When you're writing a specific story, do you have someone in mind as your audience that you end up theoretically checking in with? More specific than a general age range, etc.
Yeah, I have my ideal reader, and there's a whole bunch of them, and sometimes different ones are on deck. So if I'm doing like a Joe Ledger thriller, my ideal reader is someone who wants action, weird science, but is a humanist, not a gun nut. Because I'm a liberal left wing, but I also am a martial arts guy and was a bodyguard, and so I like the idea of a hero who is there to protect people, as opposed to a hero who is there just to serve flag and country. And so my audience tends to be the idealized person for that. If I'm writing the Rotten Ruins series, it's for kids who I've had a couple of teenagers I've known over the years who grew up in very rough situations, as I did. I grew up in a rough neighborhood, very abusive family, unfortunately. And we were surrounded essentially by monsters. And so I wrote that book for kids like me. And I kind of picked a friend of mine from back then who would be able to read that and see kind of a parallel to their own struggle to not be in the shadow of an adult whose maybe worldview has become skewed or fractured in a way that becomes completely negative. So instead, they're trying to say, well, I don't want to be defined by that. I want to be defined by something else. And an example of that is, members of my family were involved in the KKK when I was growing up. And that was a very harsh, ugly environment. And I didn't want to be that. And I got exposed to racial diversity actually through the presence of the Black Panther character in Fantastic Four comics. And that character liberated my thinking. So I write for the kids who are looking to break out of whatever hard shell is built around them by circumstance, so that they can think past where they are now, think to a future that has hope in it. So yeah, with each book, there is somebody that I'm writing to, and it's usually somebody that I have met along the way. Sometimes it's even my own younger inner self that I'm writing to, kind of saying, hey, look, I know it's tough back there, back in the 60s and so on. You're going to get out of it. I'm going to write to that as well. So it's a little bit of both.
I think that's the same answer. I write for like the stories that I wanted to, that I needed or wanted or was looking for, but also I write things that just strike me as whimsical or that generate some sort of feeling along the way. And in certain cases, I'm writing for certain people. Riverland, I wrote for my sister. And in other places, I write different stories because I or someone I'm close to, we've been having a conversation about the tension points or the interest points in certain things. So I'll check back with them and be like, did I get it? Did I do the thing? But when you're creating a world, especially when you're writing fantasy, but also if you're writing, anything that has sort of a tight, closed system, which is what a book is, that sense of I'm writing for someone else, at some point you need to cut the line, and you need to just have the book exist in and of itself, and be able to float. And so making it so that the story that's happening inside the book doesn't count on the externals is also really important. Because that's what really lets people fall into the world of a book and into the world of a story, is that sense of there is a whole world there that I want to explore in some way or another.
Fantastic.
These are great questions and even better answers. My goodness. All right, this last one is for Fran, from Jeremy. Fran, what enraptures you so about little free libraries?
I love the idea, and this is, Jonathan mentioned little free libraries and putting books in them sometimes. I love the idea that a community has come together to build something that is, if you look at them all together, they're just whimsy on a post. They are all over the place, and people are putting their whole personalities and their whole hearts and all their creativity in to make something that just makes people smile as they pass it. But it also has this interactive component that is so based in, I would like to share what I love with other people. And that sense of sort of what Jonathan's saying, here is a book that has meant something to me, and I'm going to put it in this box so that someone I will maybe never meet can come along and enjoy it, is a really wonderful thing. And it's something that I love. I feel a little bad about what happens repeatedly to the little free library in the Ship of Stolen Words, but it's also part of what happens to little free libraries is they get used, and they're meant to be used, and they're meant to be rebuilt and taken care of. So I like that a lot. But I also just love the fact that every single one of them is different. And everybody does something different with them. And some of them are made out of trees, and some of them are shaped to look like whales, and other ones I did a little bit of little free library stocking for launch day. I put 3 signed copies into 3 little free libraries in the area, and every single one of them was different. But the idea that there's a box that's containing worlds of stories, and those stories can go anywhere. So it's kind of an infinitely sized box. If you open it, it's bigger on the inside. Sorry for the TARDIS reference, but it really is sort of a mental TARDIS. I love that. Robin, I love your idea. I really hope that happens. That would be amazing. Tell everyone you know. There are copies available at Doylestown, and then I'm sure they would be happy to supply schools with them.
Very happy to. We did have another question come in for Fran. This is from Jenna. Fran, you bring a tone of hope, inspiration, and magic to what you're saying and writing about. Do you deal with dark writing days? And if so, how?
All of my relatives and friends who are watching this right now have just sort of snorted and laughed. There's an apocryphal story in our household where someone came up to the chemist at his place of work, which is doing the chemistry, and said, oh, what is it like to be married to a writer? That must be really interesting. He kind of paused and just said, there's a lot of crying. It's it's really hard when you've got this thing in your head that is beautifully formed, and you know exactly what it's supposed to do, and you go to write it down, and it's just like someone tied both hands behind your back, and you have to draw with your teeth. It just doesn't, it takes so long to get what you want to say in the shape that you want to say it, because what we see in our mind's eye is not necessarily what we're prepared to do. So that's super frustrating. And it's also, just everything about being a creative person in this world is you hit dark days now and then, and struggling through that, and also helping other people get through that, I think, is part of how I get out of it. But yeah, definitely dark days. I've talked about this a lot. That's part of the reason why I started journaling, and it's part of the reason why I maintain a plot journal, is because my brain does this really hilarious thing, and by hilarious I mean it's awful, where I will finish something and my brain will go, whoop, you don't have anything else to do. You're out of ideas. You're done. And if I can go back, I have a page in my journal every year where I put boxes of ideas. And I go back and look at them then, and I go, okay, I'm going to work on that one next. And the flip side also works, because when you're halfway through a project that is not working, and there is the crying or the, anything else, and you have this really great idea kind of show up on the periphery of your brain and go, hey, you know what? If that's not working out for you, come on over here and write me instead. And you can't, because if you stop the really hard stuff, then you may not ever get back to it. And stories that don't get finished don't get published. So if you just put that great new idea in a box in your plot journal, at least for me, that's what helps me get through all the dark stuff. Jonathan, what about you? I know that wasn't a question for you, but I'm asking you, what do you do?
No, I write dark stuff, and a lot of it comes from things I've been through. There's autobiographical elements in especially my early books. The Ghost Road Blues trilogy, which is set in the fictional town of Pine Deep, which is basically New Hope, Pennsylvania. There are elements in there that deal with child abuse and deal with racism and intolerance. And writing those things tend to give me, days when, sorry, I thought that was turned off. Tend to give me, moments of darkness and recall those incidents. But also there are days in writing when nothing is going right, or you're stressed. For me, it's usually near the end of a long book. I get a big dose of imposter syndrome, which all writers tend to get. For those who don't know what that is, that means that we writers, even though we're successful, we feel like, who the heck are we to write this book? And there are much better writers out there. There's a whole bookstore or library full of them. They're the real writers. Who am I? I get that near the end of every novel, and I've just finished my 41st novel, so you'd think it would go away right now. Not really.
That's not what I want to hear. It's supposed to go away.
But the thing is, once you finish the book and it goes into somebody else's hands, like my editor, my assistant, first readers, whatever, then they come back and you see that your perspective on it is skewed, because you've looked at it too closely for too long and you're no longer able to see it. And as a result, you lose confidence. And that can get really dark, because then you feel like you're sending in something that's going to get rejected or going to get, I keep thinking that my editors I send in a book, my editor's going to say, this is the one that's going to sink you. You should give up and go do something else. We all get that stuff, but we have to work through it. And one of the ways we work through it is by talking to other writers and seeing their dark days, their challenges, and seeing how they've worked through it. And that's what writers' communities, one of the things it's really good for is that reality check, that just because we're having doubts, and newsflash, writers are moody and emotional. Who knew, just because we have those doubts doesn't mean that they're an accurate assessment of what's going on. And you work through it, and next time it comes up, you try to remember that, it's a thing.
We had a second part to that question really quickly. Fran, Jenna's wondering if your classes are open to the general public or if you teach outside of the university.
I do some classes outside the university. I am an instructor with Futurescapes, so we have different events that people can apply for throughout the year. I also do some online courses with different writers. Kat Rambo has a lot of online classes, and I do some of those. I do a lot of talks too, and but the MFA program is separate. The course where we're teaching Jonathan's stories is separate. But I am doing a lot of work lately with libraries and schools, where I will go in and run a weekend workshop or program with them, and I love that. They just Hold on, I have to show you because I think one of the librarians is here. But the Akron library just sent me this. Look at this. How cool is that?
Oh my gosh.
So Ryan, I see you there, and I'm gonna go do a Portal Fantasy workshop with them, and that's so much fun. So that's yeah, it's sporty. It's definitely me. So I think, like Jonathan, that we do a lot of different things, and part of it is that we really like to get out there, and sometimes just teaching an hour class or a 2-hour class is a really wonderful way to touch base with people and check in. So I tend to talk about what I'm doing both on my Patreon and on Twitter, and I keep a pretty lackadaisical calendar schedule on my website, but if my assistant is screaming right now, that's that's something I'm working on, but I try to let people know when I'm doing things.
And
Cool.
Fran, it's not a question, it's more of a request from Michael. He'd ask if you'd grace them with a joke.
A joke, like Michael, like a knock knock joke? Is that what you're asking for? I'm so not prepared. So Michael, knock knock. Who's there? That's I'm so not prepared. Orange. Orange, you glad I didn't say banana?
That actually qualifies as a dad.
I have much better knock knock jokes usually. That was not a good one at all.
Oh my gosh. Well, we're coming towards the end of the event. Do either of you have anything else you'd like to say?
Just thank you so much from the bottom of my heart to Doylestown Bookstop and to Jonathan Maberry. Thank you both so much for this. Was amazing. It was a fantastic conversation, and I think that I would love to have more conversations like this. But also, thank you everybody in the audience who are there and who are in the chat and who are asking questions. It's been wonderful to see you, and especially during this time where it's really hard to launch a book. This has been an amazing evening, and I am so glad that the Ship of Stolen Words is out there with you, and thank you.
Oh, thank you.
And big thumbs up for Ship of Stolen Words. It is maybe even a better book than it is, Fran. I mean, it's really a solid piece of layered writing that is entertaining on a whole bunch of different levels, and it's one of the most enjoyable reads. As writers, we get asked to read and occasionally blurb friends' books, and sometimes you cringe, and sometimes you don't. And that was one of those where I read it and like, man, I wish the hell I'd written that. And I was so glad to have read it. So it is arguably your finest book, and that is a pretty high bar. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. Wow. Thank you.
That's going to be a Christmas present to buy kids on my list this year. So.
Awesome. And this is my last reminder that Fran is going to be coming in tomorrow to sign books. So if you would like a very special personalized copy, click the button on your screen that says buy the book, and we'll take care of it for you. Well, thank you both so much. It was so nice to see both of you virtually. Fran, I'm lucky I get to see you tomorrow, and Jonathan, I hope to see you maybe this summer.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. This was great. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I appreciate it.
And this was fun. Thank you. Thank you both. Godzilla, thank you too.
All right. Have a good night. Thanks, everyone, for watching.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.